Today, I'd like to take you to China. These are two experiences in which I traveled as a volunteer teacher in Yunnan, China. I stayed there for 2 months, for 2 summers, 2 months in total. What I learned in those 2 months are far beyond my expectation, which I can't wait to share to you. Volunteer teaching in China has only been popular in the past 10 years. According to a study from the Peking University, the richest 1% of the population in China are holding a third of the total wealth in China, whereas the poorest 25% are holding 1% of the total wealth in China. I come from a coastal city in China called Qingdao. It became the newest first-tier cities in June last year, as it used to be colonized by Germany, and it's a coastal and vibrant city. We can image it as the German Hamburg in China. So I know from the bottom of my heart that the life I'm living in, not only in Qingdao, but also here in Bath, doesn't represent the average living standard in my country. As an economics student, I care about income inequality. Especially, I'd like to know what I can do for my country. So in my first year, I got to know an organization called O-Fund, with the full name, Overseas Chinese Student Children's Fund. It was started 10 years ago by several students from London School of Economics and has branches all over the UK universities. So I signed up the application form, gone through the interviews, and I was finally fortunate enough to get selected. In late August 2016, all of the volunteer teachers, roughly 80 of us, arrived in Chengdu for 3-day training and team building. We were trained professionally to understand our role, to understand how the organization has been trying to help the underdeveloped areas. Among all this professional training, I'd like to share 2 things with you all. Firstly, I'd like to share that before this training, I've always thought that public welfare is far, far away from my real life, as it's something that Bill Gates' family, or in China, Jack Ma, would do. These are termed as philanthropy, which is the love of humanity. We can think of it as the rich people taking care of the poor, or the rich people arranging for the poor, which results the imbalance of human rights, lack of available resources and opportunities. But public welfare, on the other hand, is entirely opposite. It addresses public participation and addresses the way to grasp more opportunities. It's like teach somebody to fish versus give somebody fish. And the other thing I want to share to you is the role of a successfully run NGO. So we can think of the climate. We can think of it as has 2 sets of clients. One is the funders, the donors. We have the fund from the donors, and we manage the fund effectively to allocate to the target schools and students. And on the other hand, we recruit volunteer teachers and we innovate instructing plans and teaching plans to deliver them to the underdeveloped areas. And the volunteer teachers, they are the ones to hand over directly the fund from the donors to the target students. And back in Chengdu, I can remember that there were all these captains of each team, and they carried a locked suitcase wherever they went, wherever they go. And this is to ensure that the funds are passed securely in case of any theft. So at 3 a.m. on the 4th day, we got to know each other. We set off from Chengdu to Wenshan, which is where our target school is, via a flight transferring Kunming. This is the least torturous way we can possibly think of to go from Chengdu to the target school. Volunteer teachers to the Tibetan area, to the plateau area, they have to take 48 hours of train to get used to the oxygen concentration, and then 10 hours on the Tibetan highway. So after 3 to 4 hours of transport, we arrived in our target school. We lived with the students on the top of the floor in the student hall, in a spare room in the student hall, and this is how the campus looked like. And you might think, oh, this looks decent. It's like 6-storied building built by concrete. But actually, the living standard, the actual living standard of my pupils is entirely opposite from this one, which I'm going to show you later. The reason is because in early 21st century, the Chinese government implemented a policy which, to translate directly from Chinese, is to entirely stop certain schools in rural areas, in very remote areas, and then concentrate the resources and teachers to newly built a school in the town center. Economically, this is effective. In a sense, it optimizes the allocation of resources and teachers. But as an NGO, we kind of focuses more on how the disadvantages of such policy can affect our pupils. Because of this policy, we have, if we look at the geography in southern western China, what can we see? Mountains. What do they look like? This is what happened in the raining days. It became extremely muddy. Can the students go to school only by foot? No, they can't. Can their parents send them to school? No, they can't. This is because the average travel distance from the school to their home has increased to 6.79 kilometers. And most of the family has motorbikes, and some of them has an ox cart for farming. Because of this policy, we have bigger classes in our class, 50 to 60 pupils per class, and this has also led to the lack of the loss of Chinese minority culture, as they have their own clothes and gorgeous performance. And also, because of this policy, all the students have to live on campus. Even a 6-year-old kid would do that. What's the result? Lack of mental support from the family, school bullying, and this kind of lack of minority culture. So this has resulted in all these results, and we are there to kind of fill in the gaps and to try to solve the problems in a brand new perspective. And it's also important to mention that we'll never be there to replace the original teachers, because they are there to accompany and light up the future path of the students from years to years. And we are there to complement their roles and to bring changes and to solve problems from a new perspective. So we were each responsible for a class, and because it was the start of the semester, and the teaching pressure wasn't really hard at all. So we were each responsible for 3 to 4 classes per day, with each class being 40 minutes. As I do economics, I taught a little bit of demand and supply relationship. The way I did that was simply when I went to the school, I observed that there was a little convenience store on campus, and my pupil during the break they went to the convenience store and they bought stationery and snacks. So the way I taught economics is simply asking them, how many of you would buy a lollipop if it's 2 Chinese yuan, and how many of you would buy it if it's 5 Chinese yuan? And then do a little bit of statistics, and then draw a supply and demand curve on the board. And try to encourage my students to discuss the rationales behind this, why the curves are shaped like this. So it is by all this observing that I developed my personal method to induce all these boring economic theories. Apart from the theoretical part, I also let my students to do a group presentation with the title Young Entrepreneur. The idea is for them to open up a store in a local town center and do a group presentation and pitch to the students and the teachers. My pupils' imagination are unlimited. They are just extraordinary. Girls wanted to set up bubble tea shop, book shop, and even flower shop. And there was a group of boys wanted to set up a car retailer in the village. And their promotion was to buy one Mercedes-Benz and then you get a free motorbike, which is extremely tempting and practical. Apart from my part, my teammates also taught performing, debating, drawing, and chemistry experiments, etc. For me, as I have a great interest in photography, I also taught a simple mechanism of the camera to induce some optical physics. So, although we all ended up with a sore throat at the end of the day, we couldn't express how much we enjoyed teaching my pupils. Apart from this teaching part, we also went to the students' houses to talk to their parents and try to observe, try to get an overview of how their life is actually like. As I've mentioned, that their real living standard is totally opposite to that at school. So this is how their houses look like. This is how their inside look like. I've seen pupils with a wall of good certificates, with good performances at school, but with disabled parents, ill grandparents, and then siblings, and they are forced to quit school. They're forced to quit school to join the farm work because of this situation at home. Just a quick question to you all. How many of you have an iPhone 6s or any version or above? Hands up if you have one. Thank you. I see a large portion of you have that. So in this country, in the United Kingdom, iPhone 6s costs £449, which is equivalent to 4,000 Chinese yuan. This is twice as much as the annual income per family in that village. I didn't get this figure from any academic study or report. I got this figure from what I've been talking to their parents. I've also seen my pupil graduated from this primary school, but lack of confidence to join the junior high school because of lack of confidence and lack of financial support, and they are forced to quit school and do the farm work, while they could have stayed in that school and as a normal teenager to pursue higher education. Therefore, in order to solve this kind of problem from a new perspective, a new stream of teachers like us are needed. And in order to do that, two things are needed. One is financial support, and the other is spiritual encouragement. In the past 2 years, I've always been thinking if our short-term teaching really has an impact to the students. And even for now, the answer can be complicated. The short-term volunteer teaching cannot change the status quo of the local community fundamentally. We can't position ourselves as savior. We can't position ourselves as a god from the upper class, thinking that the pupils just cannot live without us. What we need to do is to observe, and go there and try to understand how they live and how they behave from every single bit of their life, and trying to come up with our unique solution. Although all of the teachers have one office to stay in, we mainly stay in their office. When pupils are out in the playground, we are out to play and chat with them. When pupils have their break, we are there to talk to them. When pupils have questions, we are there to answer them. When we go to remote villages, remote houses, we talk to their parents and try to understand them. It is based on all these efforts that we finally come up with our unique solutions. I've seen one girl from our target school, I can't remember. She's told one of the founders that because of our volunteer teaching, she has access to the university, and eventually she became to work in a local village council. I'm not saying that being a peasant is a bad thing or not, but I'm saying that because of this new stream or new solution to this problem, they have a better access to higher education, and therefore they come up with a more fundamental way to solve this problem. And what I'm trying to say is, do not look down upon the efforts we can bring to the students, and do not position ourselves as a savior. Although I won't be there for the summers in the future every summer, but the idea of public welfare is deeply engraved in my heart. I will think of how I bring social development, no matter what I'll be doing in the future. This is something not only I should think of, but also everybody in this room should think of, and everyone in this world should think of. And finally, in order to conclude my talk today, I'd like to throw a question to you all. What can I do to improve social development? Thank you for listening.